Topping Talks. 105 hours a week, can't be beat. Welcome to Topping Talks. Topping Talks is a Topping Tribune production, and today's episode is proudly sponsored by Topping Technologies and ExpressVPN. Topping Talks is also on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency in security. Heck, I see their founder at least twice a day. I have to say, he's quite handsome and brilliant. If you're a business in Texas and can use a hand, you can reach us at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also, are you part of the 3.6% of Americans who still care about their privacy? If you are, then perfect ExpressVPN can assist. Even though 96% of stats are made up on the spot, ExpressVPN does give back a 100% guarantee via their 30-day back money guarantee. Now, without further ado, today I'm proud to say I'm interviewing Tony, who is the head of cloud and data center connectivity at Zurich North America. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Tony.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick.
Absolutely. So I know, winding back the clock a couple of years, what was your first foray into IT, and how did you get involved?
Oh, geez. My first foray into IT was probably in the late part of the 90s. I worked in music production prior to, and Y2K was coming. At the encouragement of my girlfriend at the time, that became my wife, and now we live separate, she said, hey, why don't you think about a career in IT? And I was like, I'm not sure about that. And I just dove in, and it was very similar to roles previous, and just applied those transferable skills and haven't looked back.
And then tell me a little bit about that first role, getting into the music industry. That's a pretty unique experience.
Yeah. That was super fun. I had kind of, I came from a musical family. In fact, I've had cousins that were musicians and played with bands to the like of Nine Inch Nails and other artists as well. So I found myself in my sort of mid-teens, like in the middle of all of this, and really enjoyed more the engineering aspect of it, specifically the recording side and live sound production, and just got real involved and educated myself in that track and did some touring early on, and really throughout the 90s, that was my career, and filled the passport a few times and circled the globe a few times as well.
That's awesome. So how did you get that first job, or how did you get the job at MTV? I mean, that was a pinnacle of music when I was a kid. I mean, that was where you went to get that good music videos. It's iconic.
That was excited. I was there on the production staff for the MTV Music Video Awards, and I'll date myself.
Oh, wow.
1997, and was working with a few artists. It was a really exciting time. I mean, that year, Spice Girls were there, the Wallflowers, and a few other bands, as well as Puffy, who was just coming on the scene.
Wow.
I don't know what he goes by now. If it's But it was super fun, and Radio City Music Hall and the whole bit. And in my career, like, that was one place that I wanted to go. Is just from a working standpoint, was there. I had the opportunity to work at the Jay Leno show.
Oh, wow. What was that like?
It was really cool.
Sorry, can you move this closer just a little bit for me?
Oh, yeah, sure. And David Letterman.
Oh, wow.
I didn't make Saturday Night Live, which, was always a goal to at least, be a part of a production there. But, just New York's such a magical place, and especially when you're there seeing production, and that's so fun.
What was it like working on the Jay Leno show, or was it coordinating on the audio and the video, or what was the whole process like?
It was really just, it was a way back sort of beginning of my career, and I was an instrument rental runner. So, I would go there and pick up gear and just do various technical, instrument-based tech stuff. And it was just super fun. I mean, those shows, like, I grew up with all that, as most everybody did. And you see these stages that are just, incredible, and, get to look really behind the curtain and see what it's all about. I mean, it's from a kid from Ohio, it was super amazing experience.
Absolutely. You literally got to see how the magic happens. And, like, all the fascinating things that go on behind the scene to make a lot of people don't realize, here's a show. It's like, there's hundreds of hours in prep work and coordination and just setting up the whole thing to make sure that when it is live, it goes as smooth as possible. Of course, as we know in life, in all parts of life, it's never as smooth as possible. Then how do you improvise and how do you make sure the show is still as successful as possible?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the David Letterman show was by far my favorite. I was a huge fan. And, you know, I always thought like, hey, you know, those guys get there like right before, you know, start shooting at, you know, 11 p.m. or 11:30, whatever time zone. And then they just do their hour and then they go. And that's not the case. I mean, they're like super early.
Really?
They start shooting at like 5 p.m. And he was just a really nice guy. The way he interacts with his, you know, his crew, he throws a football around.
Yeah.
Joking, he's running through and rehearsing. I mean, these guys, I mean, it's
the real deal.
Quite a job. It's the real deal for sure.
That's awesome. He's one of my favorite. I mean, he has some of those phenomenal interviews, especially some of his recent ones too. They're great. I mean,
yeah, still a fan.
Yeah, fun, entertaining. I mean, he just nails it every single time.
Yeah, 100%.
Then what was it like? So you also worked during the live recordings. What were what's maybe some of the biggest challenges during that experience, or fun stories or interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think as it you know, applies to IT, it's you know, there's any kind of challenges. If you think about it from a project standpoint in terms of what the requirements are, I had the opportunity to work on 2 movie soundtracks.
Oh, wow.
One was the Spawn movie soundtrack, where I actually got credit on, and then the Howard Stern Private Parts soundtrack, which I actually did more work on, but got no credit on.
Oh, that's awesome. I was going to say, talk about the pin. I don't know. He didn't invent, you know, radio personalities, but he was the pinnacle. I mean,
yeah,
he was the largest, especially, I mean, he was the only reason Sirius was all those companies combined.
Right.
I mean, it was him. That's what they were buying.
Exactly. And I wish I would have had that time to have more interaction with them, but it was, you know, I thought the movie was great.
Yeah.
Be, you know, a contributor to the soundtrack, even on a very sort of low level, was just awesome. And I think it's what I was saying is just as part of like any project in terms of challenges, right? You know, your requirements are to, you know, make a song for a movie. You have engineers, you have producers, you have, you know, equipment, you have the artist, and you know, you're tracking to a goal, and pretty much anything could happen, like in, you know, most IT situations.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where your prior planning and it all comes down to execution come into play.
What was it like working on a movie soundtrack? I know those are pieces of artwork in themselves. I mean, I still can't believe John Williams is still performing in his 90s. I mean, he's one of the most brilliant composers of our time, I think.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I have a lot of respect for folks that do film. A good friend of mine had scored Scandal for the entire 12 seasons.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, it's when you talk about music, or at least my perspective, it's just like, you know, anything. I mean, the difference now than, you know, years and years ago when I was into it is there's just such good technology. I mean, folks can put together a studio for, you know, a couple $1,000s, where back then, you know, you're talking about like $500,000, $250,000 or whatever dollars. So it's like out of reach. But there's still a lot of challenge with that, because when you're scoring, it's just like writing a song, right? But how you apply that to, you know, what's on the screen, right? And the time code and the syncopation between audio and video. I mean, there's a real art to it. And I think it's just a really exciting time. I mean, a lot of guys that I know that are still in that business, they pretty much work from home, and they have their studio, and then, you know, they're using technologies that are real secure file transfer technologies, which
as
I'm
we know,
sure you guys spend a lot of time doing that. And if you think about, you know, the IP associated with that, right, the intellectual property in itself, and not having those trade secrets or being able to intercept that information, or dailies. In my consulting business, I had one of the major cable networks was one of my clients, and they were trying to really wrestle with how do we maintain a level of compliance, hold our IP, and not have anybody intercept, like, you know, daily
updates and
you know, video or audio or files or anything like that. So it's really exciting now. It hasn't been.
It's fascinating how it's something a lot of people I feel like they don't think about if they're watching a TV show or something. But one of the most important things is having the appropriate music that perfectly complements the scene to make it so much better.
Oh yeah.
And if you're into audio engineering, or if there's certain people, once you see it, you really appreciate it. Like one of the best TV shows, well, I guess it's on Netflix, but was it Tom Ellis starred in a show called Lucifer?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that was one of the best combinations of soundtracks complementing the mood of the scene and really taking the show to the next level where I don't know if there's a CD you can buy, but if there was a mixtape of that, I would buy it just for that.
Yeah.
Because all the mixes are just perfectly placed in the show. It complements the scenes. It really makes the emotions that much stronger.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh yeah,
fascinating.
it totally sets the tone for the scene and the anticipation of what's going to happen next. And it's an art, as we were saying, and I really enjoy that. I haven't worked in that area much, but I've always had a lot of admiration for guys that can do it well. And Foley engineers, which are the guys that do sound effects and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
That well-placed footstep or that slamming of the car door or any of that stuff.
It's all intentional, all calculated.
Yeah. And it's in more areas than you think, right? In terms of like any video game that you're going to play right now is going to be well scored, right?
Oh,
It's not like, having your Nintendo 64 and
Yeah.
you got your Super Mario Jam. I mean, you're going to have, quite a soundtrack or a score that goes along with the storyline. So it's super cool.
It's fascinating to see how technology is advanced and complemented and just really made everyone's lives easier. I remember when COVID first hit, South Park Studios, they were working on, of course, a couple of episodes, and they shut down the office. So I think it's a YouTube documentary or a mini, summary of the situation, but they basically, ordered desktop PCs, monitors for every single employee. They sent it all to the engineers out, and then they all just continued to work using Zoom, and then they were able to, that, or something like that, where the money is, the intellectual property, they had to secure that data and make sure when they're sending updates to each other, because, it's not like back in the day where they're using cardboard cutouts. Now it's all animated.
Yeah.
So like, how do we secure the most valuable thing, which is our, intellectual property in our show? When we're doing edits, and you don't want to have a leak, because of course the leak could, it just, ruins the whole thing.
I think if I had to look or consider silver linings as a result of COVID, I think when, that was probably one of the greatest things, right?
Oh, yeah.
For a variety of reasons. One, the brick and mortar sort of operations that were challenged, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think just through innovation, you look at that. I think it also put a big light on security of data and privacy, which is, challenges that everybody grapples with, right? Whether they're challenged by a threat or bad actor or not, I think just, there's other attack surfaces that are being looked at now, especially with the way that we work today.
Agree. And then out of curiosity, going back to your origins of working in the data center, what was your first official role in IT after working at MTV?
My first role, so after I elected to leave music production and sort of embrace more of a real job, I re-educated myself in areas of just tech, specifically with a focus on network engineering and systems, and had an opportunity to interview at PeopleSoft. And give a little bit of history. PeopleSoft founded in 1987. This is around early 2000. Bay Area-based company, so my career has predominantly been in Silicon Valley. And PeopleSoft was acquired by Oracle, and Oracle, the 800-pound gorilla. But I really had no idea of what the interview process would have been like from a tech company. And I went there just as a tour and was able to move that onto an interview. Did not do well in the interview process, so was shot down. And that was great for me because I took 6 months to really polish those skills, not only interviewing, but the technical skills too.
Oh, yeah.
And then came back and was hired. So,
that's awesome.
Data center admin, and just squeaked in right before the .com bubble burst, and just had a really great start to my career and a really great career at PeopleSoft.
Absolutely. And then what inspired you to move to the manufacturer side when you went over to NetApp for a little bit? Because that's a whole different, you got the end user environment, the working in manufacturing is a whole different scenario.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's kind of one of the benefits that I really realized in working in the Silicon Valley. PeopleSoft and being in 24/7 operations you had the opportunity to really taste, touch, and feel not only the vital components within infrastructure relative to network security systems, some business applications, but it kind of really tees you up where the entire technology stack, instead of focusing on physical layer in the data center or like 2 and 3, right? If you're talking about networks. And so NetApp was further on in my career, probably about 7-8 years into it, after working for the likes of Microsoft, Autodesk, a few other companies in the Bay Area as well. And to work for a provider that, storage and where it's hardware based, I was actually really surprised at that, NetApp really more of a software company. I still believe they're pretty much more of a software company than a hardware company.
Oh, great.
That's what really makes the box itself work. I mean, a lot of these systems are made with the same sort of components. You look at like chassis and drives and stuff. So from a commodity standpoint, that's I think they got that down to a science. But really, when you put the feature set in there and how it works, that's the real value proposition of a company like that.
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say, there's a lot of companies like Foxconn that makes a lot of things behind the scenes. I mean, a lot of them are using the same hard drives, same RAM. They may make them to a very specific spec for that company, but in the end, a lot of the big value is the people that support it as well as the software. And what was it like working on that? Because that was a global, you're handling data centers for NetApp all over the
company.
Globe too.
Yeah, I was responsible for global data center operations, which was comprised about 9 data centers throughout North America, APAC, so India, Hong Kong, and then we had a few in Europe as well.
Oh, wow.
And then I was also responsible for enterprise monitoring and automation. And that was like still, not like it, the tool sets were today. It was kind of like, okay, how do we solve all these problems with like one tool? And that was really, at least in my experience, my career, where it was like, there's not a silver bullet. You really look at it like now you think about, DevOps and what you're trying to solve for and CI/CD relative to, cloud space and pipelines. And you're not going to do that now with like a Tivoli or an OpenView or anything like that. So, it was really exciting, and especially when things are always on and the demands of that job. And, the role there is, how do you continue to support a company that's growing 30% year over year and not run out of data center space, right?
That's a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah. So, yeah. And it's different because cloud was in its infancy then, and virtualization was a really big deal. And it was like, okay, what kind of compression ratios can we get to maximize data center space? And then put in beefier boxes to handle that compute. And then it's like, oh, well, we still have the sort of what I phrase as the data center triangle, the space, power, and cooling aspects. And you don't want to make that triangle obtuse, right? So
exactly,
solving one problem, and
there's always trade-offs.
The potential of others, right?
Exactly. You fix one and you create 2 more problems. Like, well, shoot, we got to try fixing it a little bit of a different way.
Yeah. We got rid of 60 servers into one, but now we have a hot spot in the data center.
Exactly. And you're using that much more power. It's like, well, we got to balance it out. And then you got to cool it down. It's like, there's many more variables in life than people like to think they see.
Yep, for sure.
And what was it like working with people all across the globe and having teammates in all those different countries?
I think having traveled previous, I've always been really fascinated by different cultures, variety from language to cuisine to just the cultural nuance. So, the biggest challenge is always time, right? I mean, nowadays anybody could work 24 hours a day, right? But you got to sleep, right? So, and it's really just the time based on time zones, right?
Right.
And how do you make yourself, extensible as an individual and present as a leader? And so, working for a global company, I mean, God, that's pretty much been the bulk of my career, and it was just, I think, just being really fortunate and like, hey, I could stagger my work time, or hey, I'm gonna go work with them, and then when travel budgets aren't as squeezed, to get out there and really have that interaction.
Oh yeah.
And I think like right now, I mean, I've been remote since 2014.
Oh wow.
And I can't imagine really going back into the office, especially with the power of collaboration tools now. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
so great.
It makes life so much easier. And you get so much more productivity. I mean, I think pre-COVID, the average person was spending, 45 minutes to get to work, 45 minutes to get back from work. And then you got, gasoline, tolls, and then, just stress. I mean, no one dreams of being in bumper to bumper traffic. It's just,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But, I think about it, I would spend 3 hours a day in a car,
wow.
living in San Francisco and commuting to the Silicon Valley. It's an hour and a half each way.
Oh, wow.
So, I got 15 hours back in my life a week, which is awesome. But there are some times where it's just like, I really miss listening to music and rocking out, or like listening to a podcast, right?
Oh, yeah.
But from a productivity standpoint and a quality of life, it's like, oh, God, it's amazing. But
absolutely.
But there's trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
The independent time, as I was mentioning in the car, then the water cooler stuff, and then
Oh,
hey, Nick, we just wrapped up. Let's go out for a beer, and kind of hanging out with that, after work kind of thing, which is fun.
Absolutely.
It's good teams, camaraderie.
That's probably one of the biggest struggles I see is companies trying to maintain a positive corporate culture and a team, a nice collaborative team environment. It's a little bit hard to do when you guys are all remote, and sometimes across the whole country. It's
right.
There's certain things you miss out on, especially I feel like for folks who are trying to get promoted. I'm a little bit old school where I always tell people, 105 hours a week can't be beat. I'm going to grind it out and make it happen. And there's a certain thing about seeing an employee or like, a mid-level employee or someone who's trying to get promoted. Like if they're there before the boss and they're at the building after the boss, I mean, to me, that's just a good sign that they're hustling. Granted, they could be doing BS work. I mean, there's always the variables, but to me, that's an important sign. And I think it kind of sends a message out. And of course, the water cooler, a lot of people get promoted because, they finish their task and they go to their boss and like, hey, what else could I do to get promoted? What other tasks are on your plate I could take off and take off your plate? And it's a little bit hard to do when you're remote.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value. I think, the water cooler outside of, the Slack talk that would, tend to promote, you just get a little bit more insight. I mean, I liked being in the office. I like just getting up and going to somebody else's office, knocking on the door. Hey, how's it going? Hey, got a question for you, kind of thing. And there's a lot of challenges. And I think just from a visibility standpoint, and I think what you're saying is just, the recognition, right? The recognition of, hey, this is a face. He's in this meeting or she's in this meeting. And folks kind of remember that a little bit more at times. And, I would say that there's more of a cohesive aspect. But, well-oiled machines, and that's the nirvana state for management to get through that Tuckman's model and really get firing on all cylinders to get to that the performing side of your team and their trajectory. It's still doable just the same, but I do kind of miss the human element and the interaction. Right?
Yeah, it's a certain kind of culture. It's like the watering hole moments are really what you got your office family, and people have been saying it for years. I mean, you spend so much time with them, you like them, you all hang out with them. Yeah. So I think a lot of the companies I know we work with these days have kind of I think they call it the hotel approach, or they have an office, and if you want to, you can go there, you can work out there, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like more of an open table environment. So a little more laid back. So the people who really do want that experience of seeing people every day or a couple days a week, they can have that option. So I think that's a good approach. We kind of have that option for them to choose what's going to make them most efficient and happy with the role they're doing.
It's huge. I mean, there's a significant benefit, and we're on both sides. From a company perspective, you reduce your reliance on brick and mortar. There's a lot of overhead associated with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then from an employee perspective, it's just like, well, great. If I need to go into the office and I want to collaborate and whiteboard with somebody, I know that I can do it. So their quality of life it increases. It was funny. I was talking to one of the guys on my team today. We had our one-on-one, and I started really early in the morning. The company I work for now is European-based. And so I said, hey, man, I just need a couple of minutes to kind of refresh on my coffee. So we had this whole coffee conversation. Yeah. And he says, he goes, I work from home. And he goes, and I kind of miss my Starbucks runs, in the morning. It was just kind of a jam. And then it kind of went to like, well, he was telling me that it was like $50 a week or $200 extra a month on coffee, and you kind of spread that out over a year. I mean, you got like $2,500 opposed to what he does now is he just goes to Amazon, buys a big pack of Starbucks and brews at home. And he says, and it's funny when you think about going into the office, he says, you have your routine, which, I was kind of mentioning, like I like listening to music or podcasts or news, radio or whatever in the car.
Oh, yeah.
But like that was kind of his jam, right? Just having that coffee. And so when you think about being at home, and he just bought a new car, he was telling me too, he says, if increase in car payment, you think about like, oh man, when you're in the grind, you got your coffee budget, you got, your gas, your maintenance and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, hey, I want this car, but it's going to change the payment by a couple $100 a month. It's like, I'd rather go for the more expensive car now because my coffee budget isn't what it is, and I'm at home. And so, there's good positive trade-offs, across the board, both for employee and both for company, right?
I'll agree.
But, technology opportunities at the same time, which is all what it's about, right? And employee enablement, and then you think about like the network technologies associated with that, which are just really exciting right now.
Oh, it's fascinating. And it's almost a little disappointing. We have gotten to the controllerless network where, if we have to do a deployment for a network in France, there's no real reason I need to go over there and install it physically. You just ship the APs, they connect them, and they work. It's like, that would have been a fun trip. But, technology's made it. I know one of the biggest network rollouts in the U.S. a couple years back was a use case for Aruba networks where they had Starbucks. And, they have all the Aruba Central in the cloud. And they didn't have to send a tech out. They just sent the APs to the stores. They told the store manager, hey, here's the AP. All you need to do, plug into that outlet or that Ethernet port in the ceiling. You're good. Just plug that cord in. Yeah, you're done. Calls home, self-configures, and bam. Yeah. One of the largest network rollouts.
Yeah, for sure.
And then what was it like going from working at NetApp where you were managing your own data center to moving to a data center company where you were assisting in the sale of the data center space and that type of technology?
That was an amazing experience. I've always, I like to think that I have a pretty interesting perspective. Both on the IT stack and the physical plant. And a lot of that just came through, when I worked in music production, you're not always working. So you invariably learn a trade or something that you can do temporarily until your next trade comes up. Your next tour comes up. And I've never known anybody like in their technical career that said, hey, I'm going to be in data center operations. You generally like fall into it, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're, manager of systems or, cable guy or, whatever, you kind of get your bearing and there's an opportunity and you kind of move into that space. And that's kind of how I moved into data center operations, was just through promotion. And they said, hey, Tony, you have a little bit of background about the trades, you understand electrical systems. How about mechanicals? And I was like, what's mechanical? And they're like, you're hired. And that's how I grew it. And then when I had the opportunity to manage data centers, a wholesale provider, now global, it was really, I was recruited based on that experience and understanding the physical plant and then the IT stack as well. And what was even better is I had the experience from a customer of wholesale data centers, and now I had that opportunity to provide that service with the customer perspective. And I really, really enjoyed it. It stretched me in a lot of different ways, not only from thinking about the technology side of the business, right, and running the business. It was a small startup at that time, but it grew very quickly, so there was great technology challenges as well as like really get into the construction side of building a data center, which I really enjoyed, but I was able to apply a lot of my real estate knowledge in doing that. And so I ended up becoming the general manager for the portfolio, which represented about $500 million of private equity investment.
Oh, wow.
Was responsible for lease administration, property management, the technical stack, and some other functions within. And just incredible experience. And that company has just shot off like a rocket. So, and I think one of the greatest things that I learned was you focus. I've always been in operational roles, right? And I remember having a conversation with our CFO at Vantage Data Centers, and he says, Tony, you're a great ops guy. And he says, but in addition to turning on the lights, you're responsible for real property right now, and we have quite an investment in property and private equity. So your shift needs to be from beyond just keeping the lights on, which is a mainstay, but how do you de-risk the investor, right? How do you de-risk the investment? And so, fast forward a little bit, not to jump ahead, but my current role at Zurich, as you mentioned at the top of this, that's a insurance company, financial services, right? So they're very, very risk averse.
And they've only been around for about 175 years.
Yeah, 175 years. So as you can imagine, thank God the tech stack's not that old, but it's always like, how do you de-risk the business? Keep the lights on and then de-risk. And I think even from an analogous to information security, it's all about risk. What's the threat assessment? What's the risk profile? How do you maintain continuity or operational continuity, and then continue to just keep the lights on, keep the business running, and stay in front of threats and threat detection.
Absolutely. It's all about mitigating risk, just like whether it's outages or IT security, no matter how many walls or barriers you put up, or how many redundant circuits you put up, or how many redundant electric providers you put in. I mean, no matter how many redundancies there are or barriers there are, there's always a chance bad things will happen. So, how do we decrease it enough so it's acceptable to management and the investors and everyone? And then, when inevitably something happens, how do we respond to it? Because it's going to be a busy day when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was the couple first challenges when you first joined the company?
I think we were a really well-planned company. Our CEO had a lot of experience in the space, so he had a very clear vision. I think part of the challenge is always like time to market, right? Where, it was a very compelling proposition in terms of what Vantage Data Center offered then and still offers today. And then it's, I would say the challenge is when things are going to be ready from a construction standpoint. That's always kind of, even if you think about it in your house, right? It's kind of, think about the movie The Money Pit, and it's like, 2 weeks. Everything was 2 weeks. That really took a lot longer than you anticipated, right? So when you have the trades there, and you think about the technical stack, as it aligns, it doesn't always, align as well as you'd like it to. So I would say, challenges there are just, getting operating procedures in place, understanding what the construction schedule is going to look like, having things ready, getting through data center commissioning, and then really supporting the customer move in, and then really offering more of a value-added service that once they move in, you're high-fiving, the job is not done, right?
Job's just begun.
We're really continuing to manage not only just the relationship, but the services that they're essentially contracting for.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people think when the sale's complete, it's not really complete. That's when it really begins.
100%. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then what was a couple of challenges also when you're trying to sell that data center space and accommodating customers? Were there any very unusual circumstances?
Fortunately, I didn't have a sales facing role, but like in companies like that, and sales is always a part of what you do. At NetApp, I was a part of customer briefings where they would come in and they would do an executive briefing, and I'd show them how we apply the technology in our own data centers. Same thing at Vantage Data Centers and other companies, right? I mean, everybody wants to really show the effectiveness of their product and how they're drinking their own champagne, right? So, from Vantage, it's being in support of sales, doing customer tours, supporting them, and really interfacing and show with the prospective client on not only operational effectiveness, but really getting into the data center itself. You think about the MEP stack or the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing stack, and how this is a solid proposition, and how you're de-risked in terms of coming in and being a part of our customer base. I would say you asked me about the challenge or special challenges that a customer would ask for. Density. This is, I'm dating myself a little bit, so this is about 10, 12 years ago when I was with Vantage Data Centers, so density requirements, right? Everybody wanted to go higher density, and how do you cool that? How do you dissipate heat? And then network pathways, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which in a shared tenancy environment is a little bit challenging. A lot of customers, and rightfully so, they want to have pretty dedicated, conduits for their structured cable. They want to have a lot of security in meet me rooms and IDFs and MDFs, etc. So those are challenges, right? And I think we did a really good job at accommodating those challenges within reason, and that's tough at the provider level. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what inspired you to start your consulting company? Was that right after?
That was right after, and I had a long time colleague of mine that we had worked in various companies before, PeopleSoft, Oracle, and then NetApp, and we both found ourselves like pursuing more entrepreneurial sort of endeavors, and just connected. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And we just kind of shared some stories of kind of where we're going. And he says, "Would you be interested in partnering up with me on this engagement?" And that was super exciting because I had wanted to be in that space for a really long time. One, again, just the entrepreneurial side of it. It's super exciting, right? And then the other side of it is similar to Vantage, where I was a data center practitioner working for a provider in the consulting area. I was the practitioner being a provider just the same, but really serving a customer base. And that was really the fundamentals that I believe that we built Park Consulting on, was just that, the experience from a practitioner, applying their knowledge and helping one navigate through technical challenges, and opposed to, and there's a lot of great firms, but it was really just our sort of experience in having bigger providers providing services, putting awesome binders in front of us, and then high-fiving. I felt that there was an opportunity for more boutique sort of white glove services, and so that was a really exciting part.
I remember you telling me about your growth of that company. Well, because that's starting business is hard. Growing business is even harder. I mean,
growing business is hard. Sustaining that growth is even more difficult. And so when we started, it was my business partner and I, and we were hoping to have enough billable hours to feed our family that year. And it turned into opportunistically, it turned into a managed services engagement with one of our customers. And that took our numbers from 2 to 12, and then we layered on staffing services. And then in that next year, we went to like 50 employees.
Oh, wow.
In North America. And there's still North American company, as I understand it today. They probably have some European clients by now, but I mean, just that kind of growth, right?
It's huge.
Present scale challenges, back office challenges in terms of payroll, benefits, HR compliance, but it's just super exciting at the end of the day when you could look at something that you've really touched and influenced, and then have a great team. And really do something that you're passionate about and believe in.
Can't beat that feeling.
Yeah. Yep.
What was your favorite part of that role? Because I know you probably, starting business, you wear a lot of hats.
You wear a lot of hats. I think the kind of the back office of the business side, like I really enjoy that. And I kind of straddled like front office, back office, and then delivery. And that's kind of the challenge. I was on an engagement for like 18 months. And when you're focusing on an engagement and you're wearing that many hats, sales, sort of, while still good, you always run the risk of stagnation, right?
Right.
And then one of the things that we put a lot of thought into was we wanted to be very conservative on, we just had such tremendous growth to start. We didn't want to hire sales folks, just wholesale, because we didn't want to run the risk of overselling and under-delivering. And it was hard. It was hard for us at that time to find the sales folks that really kind of understood the tech stack, right?
Right.
That might even be a unicorn thinking back on it
now.
But then, was not just motivated on the dollar and motivated on service. I mean, there's a for-profit component to business. I mean, everybody, free enterprise. I'm a big fan of all of that.
Oh, yeah.
But I think for us, the reputation sake was way more important. We would rather have moderate growth and be able to provide a value-added service than an abundance of growth. And
Well, I completely agree. I mean, you look at the most successful companies in history. I mean, they all have the customer first mentality where you're going to hire the people that are going to put the customer ahead of everything, do the right thing, and because they know long term that's where you're going to have the best growth and the best culture as well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that's those are the firms that I gravitate to most. Not only from somebody that I want to work for, or what I aspired to establish in my entrepreneurial sort of endeavors, but even now, being back in the enterprise, I would rather have the firm that is solid, has the ability to execute innovation, and can say no. Which is, that's a hard one. That's a hard one to kind of, be able to navigate, because on one hand, it's sales and revenue, right? And looking for your next meal, but at the other end, it goes back to the reputation and namesake.
Yeah.
And I have a vendor right now that I work with that it really reminds me they're much larger than we were at Park and my other consulting ventures, but they are really good at saying no and telling you why. And their spirit is, hey, we'd rather do a value-added service than to say yeah, and then not serve you guys well, and just for the sale. And again, and I've said that was one of the greatest lessons that I learned at Park, especially interfacing with the CIO that I ended up doing that 18-month engagement with. And he says, hey, can you do a BCDR plan for us? And I said, well, it's not really what we do. And I said, I think you're going to be serviced best by another provider. And he said, what are you talking about? You're a consultant. You say yes to everything. And I'm like, well, not this consultant. I mean, I understand, RTOs, RPOs, and can help you through, a BIA, but, at the end of the day is that, an expertise in terms of our toolkit, you can support that effort, but, the driver's seat, you're probably going to be better served by another firm.
Oh, yeah. That was one of the most painful and difficult things when I first started Typing Technologies. I had a couple of clients where you get an at-bat, so you're spending a year, 2 years just to get that first meeting.
Right.
And then you meet them, they go, oh, yeah, here's our struggles. We have a certain, we have a storage initiative. And at the time when I started the company, that was one area we had the least amount of experience with. So I would say, I'd love to help you long-term, but for this project, I'm just going to tell you, you should probably work with this local company. I've known them for years. At the time, I didn't have a referral program or anything or get, a commission. I just said, you know what, you should use these guys. I know the sales rep, I know the engineer. They're good people. Their business focuses on storage. And long term, that helped me build a better relationship with that customer. And we've done a lot more since then, I'm proud to say. But it's just so hard to be like, no, we can't do it. But you got to do the right thing. And just it pays off in long term for your brand. And it's just the right thing to do for the customer and the client.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you kind of mentioned my experience in music production. I've been fortunate enough to be a fly in the wall when I've seen some really great producers in the room. And I remember there was one point at Park Consulting where you're thinking about what your core competency is. And we went through a branding exercise, and this is core service value. And this is more, we had this suggestion at NetApp, more than a suggestion. It was kind of a mantra that we lived by. And core services and contextual services. And we looked at that from an a technology perspective, and then where we had individuals, right? So made sourcing decisions, right? In-source, outsource, right source, based upon core service value that we provided the business. And so going through that exercise, at NetApp kind of really served me throughout my career. And so where this is going back to the music production aspect, I realized that you have a producer that will produce a record, name any producer, right? Take Rick Rubin, for example, brilliant producer. Can he play every instrument? Well, he probably could, but probably not, right? Yeah. But does he know how to maximize the performance of all the artists that are in that room to get the desired outcome. And that's kind of how I look at it. Even in my leadership roles now, it's like, there's a real producer aspect of it, right? You're producing a service, and your team is really the artist that you're executing. And I don't know how to do everything that team does, and even as it pertains to consulting, you don't need to know every facet of the business, but you can grow it reasonably at, with the right knowledge of hiring people that are not only smarter than you, but knowing when to raise your hand and say, hey, need a little help too.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the biggest keys to success is you always surround yourself with people smarter than you. Yeah. It's like I always tell people, like, I will never be the smartest person in the world, but God dang it, I won't be outworked. So I always tell people, I'll work really hard, then I'll introduce you to smart people.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Oh, fair enough.
And then how did you first get the job at Zurich, and what were a couple of the first challenges or highlights when you first joined?
So Zurich, boy, I mean, I really got lucky at Zurich. I mean, quite honestly, I've known about Zurich for a real long time, and just recognize them as a brand, especially with the time that I've spent in Europe. And I was transitioning from a company that was acquired, and they were really just kind of reorganizing, and then top level leadership, they're tightening their belt. So I saw an opportunity at Zurich, and I was like, oh my God, I gotta apply. Yeah. Never thinking that I would really hear back from them, and we went through the interview process real quick. I think I was fortunate enough to where there was a couple of active conversations. They really liked my background experience and, the data center side, connectivity side, understanding, especially on the carrier build-in side and how connectivity works, and then the cloud consulting that I did through my own consultancy practices. And it was just a really good fit all the way around. So, I think I'm about 15 months in. To my current role. So not quite a newbie, but not quite the tenure that some have there. But yeah, I feel really fortunate to have landed there.
That's awesome. Well, it's astonishing how many people, I guess, is quote unquote newer brand for America, but it's one of the most tenured companies in existence. It's 175 years. That's a lot of heritage. That's a lot of stability too.
Yeah, for sure.
And then what do you like to do outside the office?
A variety of things. I mean, I enjoy cooking a whole lot. So, that's super fun. And then I haven't really gotten back to it as I was pre-COVID, but road cycling.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I love the sort of cycling. It's a little challenging here in Texas. You don't quite have the climbs and the big views and payoffs as you do in the Bay Area, but you can definitely get out there and work nonetheless. And the challenge is 100 degrees and pedaling really hard. So,
oh yeah.
What
kind of bike, or what kind of bike do you like? Cycle?
It kind of varies. Right now, I have a Ridley, which Ridley is a Belgian
nice
bicycle company, and then I have a Custom Franco, and they're based in the U.S. and just outside of Los Angeles. And so, I got a couple of nice bikes that I've traveled with, and when I've had the opportunity to cycle in France or Italy, and there's a group that I'm still pretty active with called Mission Cycling, and they would organize great European cycling trips, and really it's just a bunch of 40-something-year-old guys with really nothing to prove, and you ride these amazing areas, and then you drink wine all night and get up and do it all over again. So it's super fun. And then I also like,
that sounds awesome. What was it like cycling in France? That just sounds picture perfect. I mean, if you're going to cycle somewhere,
it's incredible. I mean, I spent time in the Alps, so think about like flying into like Geneva, Switzerland, and then going to 2.5 or so miles down in Alps. I mean, you're really close to the Italian border. But like being a fan of cycling and watching the Tour de France, and then like going and doing these rides and doing some of these climbs like Galibier and Alpe d'Huez and stuff like that, it's like a whole different appreciation. Also demoralizing too, because Alpe d'Huez would probably take me about an hour and a half to climb it.
Yeah.
And there's like 20 some switchbacks, along the way, and pro cyclists will do it in half hour. And
geez. it's a great workout. When COVID first hit, I started it because I shut down the gym at the apartment. So I dusted off my dad has an old Seafoam Green vintage Bianchi.
Oh, wow.
And I love that thing. So I, threw in some new tubes, pumped up the tires, and
Marco Pantani rode Bianchis. He was the one that used to crush it up Galibier. And that climb's amazing.
They're beautiful pieces of
Snow
machinery
on the top, and there's a little place to grab an actual Galibier beer up there. So there's a lot of payoff, the view, and then the suds.
Oh, that's awesome. I might have to join you on one of these trips. That sounds like an incredible once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah. So great. It's so great. And I'm a big fan of two wheels. So I've probably spending more time on the motorized ones than the manual powered ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What kind's your favorite? What kinds do you have?
I kind of dove back into it pretty hard. So right now I have 5 motorcycles.
Oh, wow.
And they vary. I have a pretty full-dressed Harley Cruiser to a Royal Enfield Cafe Racer.
Oh, cool.
I have a couple of vintage Italian bikes, and then I have a Kawasaki Police 1000, which is think about chips. I have one of those, and it's super cool. And I'm out of my league even owning that bike because it's the scariest bike I have. But it has lights and sirens, and it was heavily modified with a headlight from a 1934 Hudson. So it's pretty cool.
How do you find that?
Unfortunately, I found it on Cycle Trader, which was a great find, but probably not the best investment made. Yeah. Considering what I have into it, but I think it's just such a cool bike, and it was so unique, and so it's cool.
It's hard to think of a bike that looks better in green than a Kawasaki too. That was one of the first motorcycles I ever got to ride on. It was a green Kawasaki.
Yep.
One of the entry level ninjas. I mean.
Oh yeah. I love the Kawasaki green, but this one is, because it was a police bike, it's black and white, so it's just all police badged out.
Then how did you get that vintage headlight on it too? Did it come like that, or is that something you sourced, or what was that like?
No, the guy who did the sort of, I'll lightly call it a resto mod on it, put it all on there. So he really kind of went to town on this bike, and pulled the rear swing arm off and put like an updated, ZX14 rear end on it, and then same with the front end, new forks from that, and like dual brakes and dual rotor braking and everything like that. And so he just kind of went to town on it and kind of tried to make like a real classic styled bike, and had this headlight, and just, I can't even describe sort of the thought and artistic touch that he put onto that.
Yeah.
But, so it's a, like I said, I'll lightly term it as a resto mod, but it's just a super great combination of an older police bike with even older parts with updated systems.
It's kind of, that's at the point where it's a piece of art. That is really cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
What are your thoughts on Harley going electric? They claim they're going for it.
I love electric powered vehicles. I think they're so cool. I debate on it. Like, I have ridden the Livewire.
Oh, really?
And
that was their subsidiary for a while.
Yeah. Yep. And now I think they spun it off
as its
own company.
Yeah.
And so it's probably the fastest bike I've ever ridden.
Oh yeah.
But it's also, you let go of the gas and it just slows down. So it's super torquey, and I don't think even on the test ride I used the brakes. So it's
really?
It's super fun. But I wrestle with it because, I love, sort of the internal combustion engine and the V-twins. That's why I like the Italian bikes. That's why I like Harley Davidsons, is just the rumble of that. So I think it'll be real interesting. But there's really cool things coming out, especially with their new CEO. He's German.
Yeah, I noticed.
I think really pushing not only the technology side of Harley Davidson's, like mine even has Apple CarPlay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But, he's pushing the technology side, he's pushing comfort, and he's pushing like a market that I think is ripe for the innovation that's really coming out of Harley right now. So.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be interesting because, I mean, a lot of those companies, they trademark and they put the actual sound of the exhaust in the engine because, I mean, that's such an iconic piece of the company's history and the experience too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's my perspective as a consumer, but I can't imagine that they would ever make like a Street Glide or a Fat Boy or anything like that electric.
Yeah. I don't know how I don't know how you could. I mean, of course you always could, but I don't know how that would work. It'd be very bizarre. It'll be interesting to see if they try to attempt it or what do they do in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Tony. I really appreciate it, man.
Nick,
I appreciate
it. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
I'll do it again soon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget, Topping Talks is also on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Don't forget also to like, subscribe, comment, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, tell your enemies, heck, tell anyone. Just stay safe. Have a great day. Topping Talks.